Okay. Thank you for starting the recording. So I think we are going to get going. We will see Stephanie, if you would keep an eye out for our other panelists. Here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to the West Valley Neighborhood Alliance on Homelessness, LA County Supervisor District 3 Forum. I am Pat Bates, co-chairperson of the West Valley Neighborhood Alliance on Homelessness Legislative Committee, as well as the president of the Encino Neighborhood Council. We welcome candidates Lindsay Horvath, Craig Brill, Roxanne Hogue, and hopefully Jeffy, and I may pronounce this wrong, Gurgenti will join us. Senator Stern, unfortunately, is under the weather and will not attend. Senator Hertzberg was also invited. This crucial election will fill a seat representing about 2 million people, more than 14 whole states. Its area extends from the ocean to the Santa Monica Mountains, the San Fernando and Santa Clarita Valleys, and east into denser urban areas. Please. There are many significant issues in this upcoming election. Climate change, a global pandemic, concerns about public safety and public health, poverty, housing, the list goes on. However, our focus today is the crisis of homelessness. The format will be as follows. Each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to introduce themselves and present introductory remarks in the following order. And I will call on Ms. Hogue first, then Ms. Horvath, then Mr. Brill. So Ms. Hogue, take it away.
Thank you so much. I'll set my timer so I don't lose track of time. I'm Roxanne Beckford Hogue, and I'm an immigrant to this country and got to California as soon as I could. I started out from Jamaica, and then we emigrated to Miami, Florida in the 70s. And California was always this amazing dream location far, far to the west. After graduating with a degree in psychology from Davidson College, I was working for Citibank and for corporate America, and then picked up my bags, and like many, many people who end up here, decided that it was time to try my hand in the entertainment business and being an actor. And lo and behold, I did. I've made a decent living, some years more decent than others, in the entertainment business as an actor, a SAG union member for almost 30 of those years, which is horrifying because I'm sure that I'm only like 35 in my head. I was encouraged to run for Board of Supervisors by a group of parents, moms and dads, who were incredibly frustrated by the price that their kids had to pay educationally, socially, developmentally over the past 2 years. And I think one thing that's really interesting about Los Angeles is really just how nice and chill people are, right? We vote ourselves tax increases to take care of a homeless problem because we want to do what's right by people. But what happened with our kids is that they were sacrificed and not supported in horrible ways, and we should never use young people as ballast. And so we did a little digging around and discovered that, you know, families who and people who run businesses really don't pay attention to local politics. People get really excited about presidential races and even gubernatorial ones. But to discover that the Board of Supervisors is this sort of all-encompassing legislative, quasi-judicial and executive branch run by 5 people who are really akin to the cast of The View. There's one sane one, and then 4 other people who are making decisions over really too many people's lives. I personally think that the Board of Supervisors should be larger so that we have more and better representation. They haven't been to work in 2 years, but they've found time, certainly over 10 years, to spend $6 billion on homelessness, and we've ended up with no good results. And I think it's just I find it hard to believe that the will isn't there, that we've somehow got the ability to compel people to get a vaccine, to get a haircut in a salon, but we don't have the will to compel someone to accept sobriety in exchange for an almost $1 million government provided home. So I look forward to hearing from all of you and discussing this issue. And thank you again for hosting.
Thank you very much. And next we'll call on Ms. Horvath.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is Lindsay Horvath. I currently serve as a council member, former mayor, and have been involved in local government for 15 years. In my community, we saw firsthand when I was serving as mayor during COVID, where the county was able to deliver and where it didn't. I also serving as president of California Contract Cities Association, an association of cities that contract for services, particularly with LA County, ranging from public safety to public works and so much more. I saw how communities throughout the county also face those same challenges. And it's because of that experience that I got into this race with a sense of urgency, not only because of the challenges that we all are facing, but also because of the zero-sum game that many people are playing in terms of the solutions that are being proposed. We need somebody who knows how to do the work on the ground and deliver results on a daily basis, and that's what I have done. In my community, we have year after year gotten 80%, about 80% of folks living on the streets, off the streets, and into housing services or both. I'm happy to talk more about that as we get into the conversation. We need to focus on getting people back to work and in good jobs that afford themselves and their families a good quality of life. We need to make good on the promises of measures R and M and build out our regional transportation infrastructure so people can get to good jobs, to healthcare, and all of the services that they need on a daily basis. And we need to make sure that we are investing in all of our resources and all of the solutions to keeping people safe. I have done this for 15 years with great success and want to continue to deliver results for the broader district and the county as a whole. We know that there are just too many people counting on the county to deliver. It is our social safety net. And with an annual budget of $36 billion, we need to be doing better for the people who need help most in LA County. I'm endorsed by over 100 local elected officials and local leaders, and that is not only a way that I will win this campaign, but it will be how I will govern, focusing on local issues, neighborhood by neighborhood, bringing people together to find practical, common sense solutions to the problems that are plaguing us throughout the district. I will work to bring all parts of our district together and make sure we're investing effectively in providing solutions that are needed most. I look forward to the conversation today and happy to be here again. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Brill, and I do see our fourth panelist should be joining us soon. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Craig Brill, and I live in the Beverly Grove neighborhood of Los Angeles. And I don't know if many of you remember, but we're coming up on the year anniversary of my neighbor, Gabriel Donne, that was brutally stabbed to death in his driveway. And this has really driven me to get involved in solving homelessness and mental illness issues, having grown up with family members who are mentally ill and who have suffered severe drug addiction problems. The county just isn't doing enough. We don't have enough mental beds. We don't have a good psych ward. Even if somebody is mentally ill and taken in on a 5150, 9 out of 10 times, they're just put right back out on the street. And for a neighborhood council to come and give them some water and a tent and basically say, have a nice life, that's all we can do for you. It got me on to my local councilman's homelessness committee, where we try to push issues and push solutions, sometimes to no avail, sometimes to a little bit more success, but we need to be doing better. As Roxanne said, we have spent $6 billion and the problem has only grown worse. And if we keep electing the same failed politicians that have got us here into these problems, we're never going to get out of it. We might as well have just cut every homeless person a check and said, here you go, here's a couple $100,000. It's better than what we're giving you now. We need to immediately step up shelter beds, congregate living, if need be. We need over probably about 5,000 mental health beds in the county. We need to be reinvesting in our mental health services, and we need to be pushing the state to repeal Lanterman-Petra's Short Act. And short of that, we need to be making sure that our district attorneys and our judges and our mental health courts are using Lanterman-Petra's to the best of their ability to get mentally ill people off the streets and into treatment, because that's the only way we're going to clean up this mess. We have 65,000 people living on our streets. 1,500 people are dying every year on our streets. That is unacceptable. We can solve this. We can solve it rapidly. 14 cities and counties in this country are basically at functional zero when it comes to homelessness. They've solved it. Miami's reduced their homeless population by 57% by having real accountability, real metrics, knowing who's homeless, why they're homeless, and where they're homeless, and getting them the solutions that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm thrilled to have Jeffy here. And Jeffy, how do we pronounce your last name?
Urgenti.
Urgenti, thank you. And we are, let me make that stop. We're each of the candidates is taking 3 minutes to introduce themselves and make their introductory remarks. And then we're going to launch into some questions that each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer and address. So you're on.
Okay, well, I don't want to apologize for being late. My email wouldn't let me log into my Zoom. So I appreciate you being patient while I get here. My name is Jeffy Urgenti, and in 2020, I ran for California State Assembly. I was a write-in candidate, and 951 people did figure out my name, how to spell it right, and get me on the ballot for 2020. And I ended up closing that race with 70,000 votes. So I am the daughter of a police officer, and I'm the daughter of a woman who was homeless. My mother was homeless and my mother was trafficked. I know all about what homelessness looks like, and I know what it is to be a family member and put someone through drug rehab 4 times for them to still want to stay on the streets, because the drugs were far more important than what it was that she wanted to do being sober. So with that in mind, it's a difficult situation to get people off the streets. There's been many programs that have been tried and many that have failed. Obviously, we now have more people on the streets in 2022 than we did in 2020 at the last count in 2021. This is a crisis. It is not a small issue to deal with. There are so many people that want people to stay on the streets and so many people that want them off. The people on the streets, when they're on the streets, don't want to come off the streets because they like the freedom of being able to do the drugs when they want and being able to come and go as they choose. So therefore, we need to make a choice and a decision for them. I do know this does work because I did it with my mother. So she was in San Diego. She was taken to a hospital, pulled off the streets. They left the hospital band on her. They treated her for a couple of hours, threw her back on the streets, and did what's called a patient dumping. These things are illegal. They're not supposed to be done, but it does happen. She was then picked up 12 hours later, rushed into the emergency. She wasn't supposed to make it. I had a social worker that told me if I came and I picked her up, that I would be then responsible for her. I already knew that that wasn't going to work. So she became a conservancy of the county of San Diego. She lived 10 years healthy and safe for the first time in 10 years of her life. It'll be 10 years this year since she's passed away. So in 2018, there was a bill passed by the California Senate, SB 1045. 1045 is a conservancy program when an individual is tapped 8 times on the street by any time of a health worker, a first responder, taken to a hospital in a calendar year. So in a 12-month calendar year, if they're tapped, they can be pulled off the street and the 51, 50, 72-hour hold is pulled. They go into an emergency conservancy judge, and a judge will determine whether or not they are capable of being on their own, in which case they'll be housed for 12 months, and then they will be assessed as to whether or not they will be able to manage themselves on the street on their own, or whether they'll be able to continue that conservancy. Now, this is a possibility that does work. The problem is it's not being implemented. Why? Because there's no place to house them. There's no facilities available right now that are open and that are full of staff that can handle these issues. These are things that can be done. There was no reason to spend $1.2 billion on individual door housing that are still empty. They're still not filled with occupants. And the reason being is that when you fill them with someone who's sober for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and then put them in this individual housing, they're not going to be successful. I know from personal experience, they won't be successful. So we need to figure out a better way in order to utilize the funding that we currently have. We still are paying for all these services, and they're still.
Thank you. Can we wrap that up and we'll go to questions? Excuse me. Thank you. Let's, well, we'll do the questions in the reverse order. So Ms. Girgenti can keep going. I'm going to just pose a question that's kind of on track with that. Mental illness and addiction may be a cause or a result of homelessness. Regardless, effective treatment is essential. How can the county provide more robust mental health and substance abuse services, including improved access to and continuity of services? What can be done to rapidly and significantly increase the number of psychiatric beds to allow for optimal treatment capacity and duration? Our county is about 50% short of beds. Thank you. And Mr. Girgenti?
So there are 3 facilities currently available in LA County. One of them is at half capacity and 2 of them are closed. Those facilities are difficult to find as far as where they're at. We have looked, regardless of the time we spent, we've looked to find out where these facilities are. One of them is in Santa Fe. If they open these facilities, they can fit beds of individuals they can pull off through the SB 1045 bill that was passed. We can get them in, we can get them secured, we can put them in a secured environment where they're able to work on the issues that they have at hand. We have programs currently at CSUN, USC, and UCLA for the master's program for social workers. These social workers don't have these programs don't have enough programs for the interns to go and finish their programs. We can pull these people from these programs and put them in those internships so that we can help people in these situations, whether they're mentally ill or whether they are on drug or alcohol addiction. We also have the Medicare Act that was passed in 2018 during the last presidency that was able to allow a facility to ask for funding through the Medicare system. The only caveat is the governor of California would have to declare an emergency. So if he declares an emergency for mental health and for alcohol and drug abuse, then that could be used as part of the federal funding towards the cost of these facilities. These facilities are here, they're just close and not being used.
Thank you. And next we would have Mr. Brill.
Yeah, I mean, there is no, as Heffy was saying, there is no place to put these people. We need to immediately, whether it's expanding Norwalk, reopening the Pomona and Camarillo facilities, rebuilding the facility at Rancho Los Amigos that used to be a working poor farm where we sent mentally ill and drug addicted people from the 30s and the Great Depression. That was a great place for them to live, to commune, and they was self-sustaining and was a success, and we shut it down in the 80s. And we slowly closed all of our mental health facilities. We need to reopen them. And we also need to build community mental health facilities where people experiencing mental health have some place to go when they're under conservatorship that's closer to their families. So their families can be part of their rehabilitation. But until we get these beds up and running, there is nowhere to put these people. And it's just the utterness of inhumanity that we've even allowed this to grow to this level in the last 30, 40 years. I mean, I drive these streets every day as a doggy daycare owner, picking up my clients' dogs from Venice Beach to Hancock Park. And the level of human degradation that we see, and the people that keep calling to let this continue, to let these people stay on the streets, to not help them. I don't know where their logic comes from, because it is the most inhumane treatment that we are doing. We wouldn't give our grandmother with cancer a tent and say, you know, enjoy your illness, have a nice life. Why are we doing this with our mentally ill and our drug addicted? We need to be using our mental health professionals and law enforcement working hand in hand. There needs to be carrots and sticks. And if the carrots aren't working, then we need to use the sticks. And the sticks, you know, are, you can go to drug rehab if you're an addict, or you're going to go to jail, but you're not sitting here in an open air drug market, leaving your needles all over the streets for children to walk through on their way to school. This needs to turn around, and it needs to be turned around fast. And if the governor won't declare a state of emergency, I will push the Board of Supervisors to declare one in the county.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Horvath.
Thank you very much. The programs that we have instituted include having people out on the streets every day of the week, meeting people who are unhoused and in need every day with the services and support that is provided both by our community through our city resources, as well as through county resources. We meet people where they are, asking our most challenged residents to navigate sometimes up to 4 bureaucratic departments to access the services and support they need is absolutely unacceptable. It's just not reasonable to think that anybody's going to be able to do that. We need to meet people where they are and connect them with the resources that they need. I have actually done that. We, as I mentioned, have been able to get about 80% of our unhoused residents off the streets and into housing services, or both. On the housing side, we work with social service providers who hire formerly unhoused people, providing them employment opportunity and a level of trust for those who haven't been who are living on the streets and aren't quite sure about the resources that are being offered. We also get them into housing with supportive services that includes substance abuse or substance use abuse and addiction issues, mental health, and we need to invest in our Department of Mental Health and make sure that services that people need to access are not hours away. They need to be located within community in places where they trust. And Supervisor Janice Hahn has a plan to locate urgent mental health urgent cares in community. I support her plan and intend to work with her on creating that. So not only those who are in most need, but people who have everyday mental health needs can access those services within their own communities. We need to make sure on the safety side that we are partnering mental health professionals with law enforcement, which is exactly what I have done in my community, working with the Sheriff's Department and investing in mental evaluation teams who go out and meet people on these calls and are able to diagnose them and get them into services, treatment, and care, as opposed to jailing them simply for being unhoused. This has gotten people off the streets and into housing and services. I know firsthand through the experience of someone who is living and on the streets in my community. I connected him with services. He now lives in permanent supportive affordable housing in my community that we built through inclusionary housing programs. We need to have more housing that is affordable and has wraparound services available.
Thank you. Ms. Hoag. You're muted.
I was trying to be so quiet. Jeffy and Craig made some great points, and even Lindsay as well, but we're missing the forest for the trees here. This is not a monolithic population. And to pretend that we have a homelessness issue solely because of affordability or even mental health issues is completely wrong. This is primarily a drug addiction issue. The meth they're using today is not your grandfather's meth. I mean, this is a crisis that we think is mental health issues. And then when you put someone in jail overnight, for example, they dry out and the voices stop. So it's not a matter of actual mental health. It is the side effects of drug addiction. And so there's a difference between criminal vagrancy and people who are broken souls who, yes, need help. As a mother, my heart goes out to everyone that we see on the streets. They are someone's kids. Some of those people are searching for them still, and they've come to LA from all over. This is not a homegrown problem. Yeah, it'd be great if we could get Medicare reimbursement for already existent facilities to take care of people, but there's big business. Homelessness is big business. I have 2 letters here from Mental Health America of California, and those lobbyists are working really hard to make sure that the care courts don't happen because they want that for themselves. So I think we really need to look at the fact that what we've done has not worked except for one group. The people who make money off homelessness, the homelessness industrial complex has done fabulously. And we have done it by sacrificing these people who deserve better treatment. Another group that we forget about that deserves better treatment are the women who feel unsafe walking the streets, people who use wheelchairs, who need to be able to access wide sidewalks, children who can't get anywhere. Someone earlier mentioned something about transportation and affordable housing. Well, if your entire transportation system in LA County is basically an open air drug festival with a bathroom facility thrown in, how do we get people to take public transportation?
Will we ever recover from Zoom? That's what I'd like to know. Here's an interesting thing. Today's LA Times reports that San Mateo County has pledged to reduce homelessness to functional zero by the end of 2022 by establishing a coordinated, data-driven program. LA County lacks a coordinated plan between the county, the cities, and even individual LA City Council districts, the nonprofit sector, and the rest of the community. Do you believe Los Angeles County would benefit from such a strategy? And what would you see as LASA's role in such a plan? Would their authority be expanded or would they be eliminated? Thank you. And Ms. Hogue, you can start first.
I think that what we've done clearly hasn't worked, except for the mass expenditure of money. So it would be, you can see the difference just by going from city to city in LA County. There's a vast difference in the streets of Burbank versus the streets of North Hollywood. There's literally areas where one side of the street, the underpass, is packed with an encampment and the other side is clean. And it's not even a matter of will. It's that the status quo and politicians have there's no motivation to solve the problem. And until it hits people at home, until we see what happened to Jacqueline Avant, what happened to Brianna Kupfer, what happened to Sandra Shells, this is not an issue of, oh, it sounds really great. Real people are dying. In addition to the 1,500 whose names we don't know on the street every day. The 2021 sort of report that was commissioned for LA County, and LA County Public Health got to see it as well. The #1 cause of death for people experiencing homeless is drug overdose. Then it's coronary issues, which come from a long, long history of drug overdose. So there's an absolute crisis, and no one has any impetus to change it. And that's partly because of the way that the county and the city councils are all set up. There's a lot of people at the table, but everyone at the table has the same thought. So diversity is great, but a bunch of people looking different and all thinking the same thing isn't going to get us anywhere. America has solved problems and gotten man on the moon by having, prosecution and defense, having someone who's housing first next to someone who's treatment first. So we need to get viewpoint diversity into the room, and then we can solve the problem.
Thank you. Ms. Horvath.
Thank you very much. I think that clearly what is in existence isn't working. And we've seen that in my community. We actually invited service providers and county representatives to our community for a roundtable discussion with my council on this issue. And we were told directly by the county that the county needed to be doing what's going on in my city in order to get it together. And we need to make sure that there's accountability on this issue. That is the word. It's not just about having a representative body. It's who is actually being held accountable. We need to stop the finger pointing and the blame game and actually get to results. And that's what we have done in my community. That's what we need from LA County. LAHSA can be that body if it's actually going to be empowered to be accountable. But I think we actually need a new body with elected officials who are directly accountable to the people who have voted them in, who are answerable to the public on a weekly basis during this time of crisis until such time as we've deemed that homelessness is no longer a crisis in LA County. We need regular reporting, stats. We need service providers at the table, people with lived experience of homelessness to inform our policies and how we are holding ourselves accountable and where to best use the dollars spent at the local level. I am currently doing that, partnering with organizations that have contracts with the county who provide these services. They have my trust and I trust them. We work in partnership well together. Also, as I mentioned, with the Sheriff's Department and mental health professionals to provide those services and that accountability. That's what we need is a body that's directly accountable to the services that they're providing to make sure that the results are happening in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Mr. Brill.
So everyone will say this is difficult, and it is somewhat difficult, but it's been done in 14 other cities and counties. And now you say San Mateo is sounds like they're jumping on board with the Built for Zero plan, which does work and has worked. And it's going to take us rejiggering LAHSA to make it more of a county-wide organization, not just a joint powers agreement between the city of LA and the county. And we need to bring in all of the service providers, and there needs to be real-time data, coordination with goals, and real accountability. And if our service providers aren't being held accountable, we need to stop their funding and fund a service provider that will be more accountable to the county. We need to know, why people are homeless, who they are, where they are, and what they need. We need real-time mapping programs. I mean, that is essential to tell us exactly how many resources we need and for whom. We spend billions of dollars. I mean, we spend about $50,000 per person without even housing them. We haven't even housed them. Why don't we just give them a check for $100,000? It would be a lot simpler. And yes, affordable housing is an issue, but that's not the key driver of homelessness. You can't give somebody having a psychotic episode and put them into a room and expect them to go out the next day and get jobs. These people need treatment. They don't need tents. And we need to rejigger the billions we are wasting trying to solve this problem and put it into effective programs. And I would suggest that the county get together with Built for Zero, because they're using plans based on science, evidence-based plans that will help get us out of this problem. Doesn't need to take decades. It took us decades to get here, but if we act responsibly with accountability, we can get out of this mess quickly. I think you're on mute, Pat.
And I said thank you and Mr. Genty.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say that I believe LAHSA is the problem. And a large part of the reason I say that is because they have a $300 million federal, state, county, and city funds for providing shelter, permanent housing, and services to people experiencing homelessness. the city of Los Angeles has 10 million invested and the county has 44 million. The numbers on that for what they were supposed to have done is really a crime. Individuals who were placed in a shelter or a bridge housing goal was 20% for LAHSA. They only completed 14%. Individuals assessed who were placed in permanent housing, their goal was 10%. They only reached 4%. Individuals with self-identified and substance abuse disorder and obtained treatment, goal 25%. They managed 6%. Individuals who self-identified a mental health need and obtained treatment, goal 25%. They met 4%. So LAHSA is a huge part of the problem. There's no accountability as far as the people that are running LAHSA. They are going out, they're double counting people and coming up with these numbers. How are we going to solve a problem when we don't really know the true numbers of what's going on? How do we solve a problem when they just keep throwing money away with zero accountability? So as a county supervisor, I believe we need to put more people on the boards that are accountable. We need people that actually know how to do math. Let's just start with that. Let's start with people that actually know how to run a budget. Let's start with people that understand drug abuse. There are plenty of organizations like AA that can bring in people that have been in that program for 36 plus years that can let you know why the programs today are not working and how we can make them work. And you know what? Shame on Los Angeles and the people that have defunded the police department, because you know what? LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva has the host program, and he does not have enough officers because he doesn't have enough funding in order to partner with the right amount of people. He has a program already working with social workers that go out and know the people on the street. But when you have three teams to do that, that's by far short for the 66,000 people on the street that are unhoused. So my thing is, let's fund our police department. Let's work with LAPD Hope. Let's work with the LA County Sheriff and the host program. Let's get our funding squared away and let's get rid of LAHSA. And I know people love LAHSA. I've actually worked with them and I watched them count people. They walked up to a 10 and said, how many people are in there? 1. Okay, great. 3 people walked out. So
Thank
they're
you.
not even getting correct counting.
That's about 2 minutes. Thank you. And the next question is interesting. It did in the article about San Mateo County, it showed an RV safe parking lot. And one of the questions we've been posed is RVs seem to be an increasingly popular means for some to address their housing needs. And we have seen that all over the city as well. What could the county do to take the lead in providing RV safe parking locations, or even providing RVs for housing in such locations, which I can pretty much guarantee they wouldn't cost $800,000 a unit? We'll start again with Mr. Genty. Now you're muted.
Trying to be polite and keep myself muted. So as far as the RVs are concerned, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not up for the RVs being parked around neighborhoods or parked in safe locations. They did that down during the COVID at Griffith Park. It's just not, it doesn't work. There's nobody to clean them. At night, there's problems. You have to hire police officers and security in order to maintain the security in these areas. I live in Woodland Hills. They had one not far from my house. The residents did nothing but complain about it. And it was supposed to be safe and secure, yet they didn't have safe security. So I just don't believe in the whole RV park. I just don't think it works. If they're in an RV, then let them drive somewhere else to where they came from and take it up elsewhere. But I'm sorry, I will not be on board with that. The members of my community are not for it. So I'm just not for it.
Thank you. And Mr. Brill next.
So mobile homes and motor homes and trailers can be a solution, but we need to take the empty, vacant county properties that we have throughout the county and set these up so that they have hookups, so the sanitation can be properly taken care of. We can't just put a bunch of motorhomes on a lot and say, good luck to you. That's basically giving them a step up from a tent. There's no reason why we can't turn these empty properties into functional parks for these people to live in with full wraparound services, with full security. And giving them full security means we actually fund our sheriff's department. Right now, we have 0.9 sheriffs per 1,000 people in the county. The state average is about 2.5, and we're not even meeting that. So we can't promise security if we're not going to fund our sheriff's department. And so, yes, I would support it, but with funding our sheriff's department and bringing in the wraparound services so that we're not having what we have here on the west side. We have Winnebagos of meth. We don't want that. We don't need that. And it needs to be regulated.
Thank you. And Ms. Horvath.
Thank you for the question. What we actually need is permanent supportive housing. We need housing with wraparound services that are accessible to the people who are placed in housing. Investing in RVs is not a sustainable solution. It keeps people at risk and does not deliver the services that actually exist in the county to take care of people who are in these circumstances. We need to do better. We need to create more housing. In my community, we have an inclusionary housing policy where at least 20% of all the housing that is built is set aside for moderate, low, and very low income people. And when million and billion dollar investors are coming in asking to build housing, it's the least that they can do to build housing that is actually affordable for the people who need it most. We don't need a lot more of luxury housing without the option for all people to be able to live in community and have affordable housing options that include supportive services that people need to stay in that housing. That's the kind of housing I know how to create in my community. That's the kind of solution we need to be investing in, not an unsustainable one like furthering RVs in our communities and in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. And Ms. Hope.
Craig and Jeffy are right. RVs are a disastrous idea. Treatment not tents is definitely a great thing to say. And the fact is an RV becomes a hotbed of drug use, sexual assault for women who I thought we cared about, and an environmental disaster, even worse than the one of having all the garbage and detritus on our streets already. I'd like to point out, as Adam Carolla has, that LA County and City have set up this system that is bifurcated. On the one hand, you have people who follow the rules and are expected to pay for everything. I promise you that if I were to put, I don't know why I'm purple all of a sudden, but if I were to, I don't know what happened there. I didn't do anything. That if I were to put, it's very trippy, if I were to put an RV in my own personal driveway and not cut the lawn and let the effluvia come out from the RV, I would be ticketed tomorrow. We should have the same expectations, just like a parent. I'm not doing any of my kids any favors by having no expectations for their behavior and coddling their drug use, their criminality, their lack of will, or not helping them with their mental health. By the way, New York has 4 officers per 1,000. So the statewide average is not even close to where we need to be. And yes, law enforcement does need to be involved. I was actually just talking about carrots and sticks in a live before we started, Craig. So I appreciate that as well. I mean, we understand it as parents. We understand it as employers. We understand it, you know, if your brother-in-law came to you and he was a meth addict and he said, hey, can you pay my rent? You would understand that money is fungible and that you paying his rent would enable his meth habit, which basically is sentencing him to death. So I think we've really let a lot of people down. RVs are just one of another series of terrible, terrible ideas. We have parking laws, we have vagrancy laws, and no, you're not thrown in jail for the crime of being homeless, but for the crime of shooting up, stealing bikes, and assaulting people on the street.
Thank you. So I don't think people like the RV idea. That was interesting. Okay, we are at
how to make me not be purple. I would really appreciate
I
it.
didn't do it. I promise. It might be your filters if you can check that. We're at 4:53. Would the panel be willing to take one more question and then we will go to the follow-up? So here's the one additional question. And let's see, this is interesting. How can we generally increase not only low-income housing, but all the way up through middle-income housing in our county? We know it's needed across the board, from school teachers to people that may be coming off homelessness. And in that context, would you support a publicly or nonprofit operated social housing model to provide housing for all income levels that currently desperately need housing? And I'll start with Ms. Hogue.
So interestingly enough, I wrote an article about this in 2018 and nothing has changed. It's only gotten worse. It's in the LA Daily News. Our elected officials hold much of the blame for our affordable housing problem. You can certainly Google it. I'll try to drop it into the chat. Every affordability problem we have, aside from the fact that we have great weather, beautiful lifestyle, everybody wants to be here, is government putting their thumb on the scale of development. It sounds great to say that developers should have to set aside something for affordable housing. We all know where that's going. First of all, nobody wants to live in a $10,000 a month penthouse with Section 8 housing below them. And that's just becomes a payoff system for developers and big developers. This all comes from the legislature saying that the primary thing we have to pay attention to is vehicle miles traveled, so that we can't develop the sprawling land outside. And so that's CEQA is one of the things that needs to be addressed. The second problem that LA County Board of Supervisors exacerbates continually, and just did within the past month with a vote to continue extending the landlord moratorium. Who in their right mind would rent out a room, an apartment, an ADU to someone that they can never get rid of for non-payment of rent? I certainly wouldn't. When I first had a house here in the Hollywood Hills, we had a little back house and we rented it to friends of the family. If I now had an extra space, there is no way a stranger would get that opportunity. So you can see that putting your thumb on the scale actually makes things less accessible and more about elites and who you know in order to get basics like housing. So far, everything government has done and everything the Board of Supervisors has done for affordability makes things scarcer and more expensive. And that's pretty much what happens every time government steps in. I just want
Thank you.
I'll deal with it in my closing statement, but
Okay,
government solutions are not the answer.
Oh, let's see. Ms. Horvath.
Thank you. Actually, just as I said in my last answer, I have a lot of experience doing this in my own community, partnering with nonprofits to create permanent, affordable housing in our community, moderate, low, and very low income housing. It actually happens. People live in buildings where inclusionary units exist. It happens in my community all the time, and people still want to move into West Hollywood. They like living in a diverse community. They like being in community with others, and they like this policy because it provides housing for people who need it the most. We also need to have partners at the state level who are interested in actually creating affordable housing options. ADU, we made progress on ADUs. There's now someone who's introducing a bill to maybe roll back the progress that we've made on ADUs to create affordable housing options. We shouldn't be doing that. We need to have more tools on the table to address our housing needs, not fewer. Yes, I would be supportive of the model that you suggested to create more permanent affordable housing and social housing in community. We need to make sure that people have affordable housing options within the community in which they're living. I know firsthand, as I mentioned earlier, someone was living on our streets. I worked with him to get him connected to services and support. He now lives in that affordable housing in my community. I've seen it work firsthand. We just need to scale these solutions and have them exist throughout the district and throughout the county. So we're actually seeing results throughout the county instead of just pushing the problems to different neighborhoods in places where people aren't being held accountable and aren't delivering those solutions. We are. I know how to do it, and I know how to do it for the broader district. That's what we need, is somebody who has the experience to get it done.
Thank you. And Mr. Brill.
Yeah, we need to actually unleash our development community, and we need to get rid of some of our restrictive zoning policies and rezone areas, especially in our light industrial parks where many of those jobs aren't coming back. We should be turning those into live work communities and building on our transit oriented neighborhoods, expanding our housing. There's no reason why we should be spending 650, 700,000 a unit to build housing, when housing construction costs are around $250 to $350 a square foot. We should be able to build plenty of units in the $200,000 to $300,000, even $400,000 range to accommodate low income, middle income, and then subsidize the very poor with Section 8 vouchers to live in our neighborhoods and spread them out throughout our county so that they're not concentrated in ghettos. I mean, LA County right now is, I believe, the biggest slumlord we have in the state. If you go look at any of the residual public housing accommodations that we have left over, they are rundown tenements that if it was a private sector owner owning these buildings, they'd be in jail. So why aren't our Board of Supervisors in jail for providing the same lack of quality in our public housing? Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Genti.
Hi. So adding more homes, low income, where are we putting it is what I want to know. We don't have a lot of space. So does that mean that we're going to close places like Whiteman Airport that we desperately need to create this housing? Next door to my office, they want to take the 818 motel and turn it into a family homeless shelter. Next to that is the extended stay. They want to make it a senior homeless housing situation across the street from a high school. These are not viable solutions for low-cost housing. We need to focus on helping our mentally ill, helping our drug addicted, and get them taken care of and find them sustainable housing after they've gone through conservatorship and they can focus on themselves. We have housing that we've already created that went through the HHH measure that was resoundingly popular by voters. They passed it, $1.2 billion. So where is that money? They've used it for housing. That housing's empty. 528 units are empty with 24 with people in them. And I'm sure those numbers have changed slightly, either up or down since I last looked into it a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know. I just don't think that creating low or moderate income housing. And the other thing is, who's owning that housing? Is the county paying for it? Is the state going to pay for it? Are the taxpayers going to pay for it? Are we going to pass another bond measure on current homeowners for us to pay for it? So where's the money coming from that we're going to pay for that? So I think we need to focus more on how we're going to solve our homeless problem than we are going to work on some other of those issues.
Thank you very much. And this has just been great. I think we have all learned a lot about everybody's views, and I really do thank you for attending. And at this point, it's after 5, so I think we should begin our closing statements. So I'll ask if you can take 2.5 minutes or a little less. And let's start with Mr. Brill.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this. It's been informative. I've learned a lot. Hopefully everyone else has this too. But we need to get back to the business of holding our institutions accountable. And we can't do that with the same failed politicians that have been in office for decades. They may think they have the answers, but they don't, because if they did, these problems would have been solved. I'm here to actually get them solved, to redirect the funding that we need to put into our mental health facilities, to rebuild mental health facilities in LA County. We should have the world-class mental health institutions in the country. LA County used to be known for its healthcare department. It was one of the best. Now it's probably one of the worst. And we're spending billions of dollars and not helping people to the level that they need help. We need to redirect these funds. We need to be pushing our developers and working with our unions to coming up with low cost solutions in developing housing, whether it's, modular housing, container housing, whatever it is that we can rapidly ramp up, build up housing, so that we can get people who aren't experiencing mental health problems or addiction problems, that we can get them into the housing that they need and that they can afford. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Genti.
Thank you again for having me on this meeting. It's a pleasure to meet everyone face to face that is running for the same position. And I appreciate all the neighbors and local community that have come on. So homelessness is a huge problem for LA County. It's one of the prime reasons that I'm running. Public safety is another issue. We need to refund our police departments. We need to be able to support them and hear what they have to say. My local SLO, which is a senior lead officer at LAPD, is very concerned with the options that we're offering for a homeless housing, as in the 818 motel next to me. He's got a questionnaire of 10, 15 questions that are serious questions that have never gone answered. I think programs like LAHSA need to disappear. We need to create new programs, and we need to put people in that are going to be accountable for the money that we're asking our taxpayers to pay. We have created housing at a great expense to us, and it's empty. It's not being used. So we need to worry about mental health. Mental health is a crisis. That's why we've got so many people on the street, as is the drug and alcohol issue. We need to open up our public health and get people to work together in order to help those that are in most need. And it's not going to be done with the current people that we have going on. They've had years and years and years. They've passed bills like SB 1045. They are not using it. So we have the tools in hand. They're just not being used by the current people that are sitting in our city councils and our local government and our state government. So I appreciate the moments that you've given me here, and have yourselves a great Sunday afternoon.
Thank you. And Ms. Hoag.
Thank you again. I always think that more speech is better. More sunlight on a problem is always better. And so thank you so much for doing this. We could get a lot of the big money out of politics if there were more forums and less reliance on advertising. I think one thing, Pat, that you said was wrong, was that an RV wouldn't cost too much. If the government was providing it, it would cost a lot, because the tiny homes they built in North Hollywood here next to NoHo West are basically sheds from Home Depot that cost $2,500 a unit. And somehow magically it was 10 or 20 times more when the homelessness industrial complex got a hold of it. In project management, whether you're building a building or a website, there's 3 principles, right? You can have something cheap, fast, or good. You can only pick 2. Well, LA County has decided to pick none. We have spent tons of money, wasted tons of time, and come up with solutions that do not work. And we need to demand better of our elected officials. The founders intended people who were regular citizens to cycle into and out of government, instead of using it as like a lifelong sinecure that you could just, that's what you do, and you do nothing else. Because if you live in the private sector, if you're even a mom like me, you see that you get more of behavior you reward. And we have rewarded open air drug use, encampments, lack of aiming towards sobriety. I know that Mike Gatto, who is a former assemblyman, talked about the importance of that first contact. And yes, sometimes it's with law enforcement, but the principle of hitting rock bottom and then choosing, because people choose sobriety. You can't force it on someone, but when the choice is between the carrot and the stick of, you can't park here, you can't keep your piles of stuff here that's full of rat droppings and is dangerous to public health, then you realize, oh, you know what, maybe I will make a change. And so for the safety and compassion of all those people, we need to come up with solutions that work Part of that involves working with the sheriff and with law enforcement and with all hands on deck. But the people that are running a full-on money laundering operation with the billions of dollars that went to homelessness all need to be gone.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, Ms. Horvath.
Thank you very much for this opportunity and for the discussion today. I hear people every day expressing their frustration. They've passed the measures, they've taxed themselves, they voted for the people who made all kinds of promises, and we feel like we're in a worse position than when all of this first started. We need real solutions, we need accountability, and we need somebody who knows how to get it done. That's why I'm in this race. When we talk about ways to keep people safe, the best thing that we can do is get people into housing, services, and care. While I was waiting for support from the state and the county in my community, people were counting on me to deliver. So I stepped up and I did. We funded services and support. We spend more than 10% of our annual budget on services and care, which is what is proposed at the LA County level. We need to invest that funding into services and supportive care to take care of people. We need to make sure that we are building housing, protecting the housing that is affordable for people, and creating new housing options and repurposing commercial spaces and adaptive reuse to rapidly get people into housing now. As a renter, as a millennial, as somebody who's looking at an increasingly unaffordable future for our future generations, we need somebody who's going to face the music on the decisions that we're making at the county board. I want the community to work with me and developing those solutions neighborhood by neighborhood. It's why I'm endorsed by local housing advocates and local leaders and throughout all of the neighborhoods in this district. We need to work together to provide solutions that work for our neighborhoods, that get people housed, that take care of them and keep our residents safe. That is the commitment LA County must make to our residents. It is a social safety net for all of us, and we must count on the county to deliver on those promises. I'm up to the challenge. I'm already doing the work, and I'm ready to do the work for District 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to each of our candidates. We so appreciate you being here and discussing the issues in such depth. So I do thank you for your time. We have recorded the meeting. We will, I know I'll put it up on the Encino Neighborhood Council website, so anyone that missed it can have a listen. And I do want to thank the board of the West Valley Neighborhood Alliance on Homelessness, Tom Booth, Ray, Miran, Stephanie, Olivia. If any one of you wants to say something, jump in now, because, oh, Olivia does. There we go.
I just wanted to thank everyone for being here and just give an exceptional thank you and a round of applause for Pat Bates for jumping in and moderating with her exceptional grace and ease and just unflappability with technology and handling all the questions coming in, as well as to thank all of our audience members who were here and attended, all of our attendees for your excellent questions in the chat. We'll be sure to forward them on. The panelists could see, and we're sorry we didn't have time to answer all of them here, but we'll make sure that those are made available. We've also have kept a record of those and we'll be posting it on the WVNAH website. We do have our general meeting, so if there is anyone who would like to attend, we're trying to figure out how to put a comment in so that you could just click on the link, but we're with a webinar, I'm not sure how to do that. So Pat, I don't know if you can post it in, but you can definitely.
What did you want to do?
Just put in the link for the next meeting, if we could, into a comment. So it's in the our chat. If anybody,
I don't believe I can do that, but what I could do is I could send out an email